Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome those of you who are joining us online. We ask everyone at this time to please be seated. You'll be able to see the family during the Shiva. We are going to begin the funeral service of Mrs. Faye Schwartz. We invite everybody to be sure that your cell phones have been turned off. Rabbi Sharon Morton, who is the niece of Mrs. Schwartz, will be officiating. Once again, a last and gentle reminder, please be sure your phones are off, and the rabbi will begin the sacred funeral ceremony.
We are here today to celebrate the life of Faye Schwartz, who is no longer at our side physically to share the beauty of each passing moment, but she will always be in our minds and in our hearts because she has instilled happiness, love, and strength in so many people, and that will not fade, and it will go on from generation to generation. I want to extend my deepest condolences to Selma Wolf, her amazing big older sister, to her wonderful children, Mark and Myra Schwartz, to her grandchildren, Robbie and Shana Schwartz, and even to her tiny great-grandchild, Lily Rachel Schwartz, who will get to know her great-grandma well through stories that she will undoubtedly hear during her lifetime. And also to her 100 loving nieces, nephews, and special friends, so many special friends. And of course, Faye's life was very enriched with her 62-year marriage to Ray Schwartz and her very special relationship with her daughter-in-law, Leslie Schwartz, during Leslie's lifetime. As we grieve our loss, we also acknowledge our gratitude. We are grateful for Faye's long life. We are grateful for her love, which has been all-encompassing, and we are grateful for her legacy, which will endure with us forever. Zichrono livracha, may you be blessed by your memories of her, all of you, all of us. There is a story in our tradition, I have no idea if it's true, that when a person dies, they kind of hang around for a week or so to make sure that their family is okay, to give their last blessings to the family. And I'd like to think that somehow my Aunt Faye is here with us today and that she's watching over us, loving us, and wanting us desperately to have healthy, fulfilling, and wonderful lives. It is an honor to be here as rabbi to officiate at this funeral, but I also stand here as one of the loving and loved family members of one of the most special people I have ever known. There is a quote in our tradition that says there are at least 36 righteous people in the world at all time, and they are the ones that keep the world going and keep people okay with lives. I believe that Faye is one of those 36 righteous people because of the way she lived her life, the way she embraced others, and who she was as a person, as a relative, as a friend. And now, I invite Rabbi Harold Kudan to lead us in the 23rd Psalm, and then in a special reading that Faye said long ago that she wanted to have read at her funeral. Both of those readings are in your little program book.
Please join with me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. he restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Poem to those I love. If I should ever leave you whom I love, to go along the silent way, grieve not nor speak of me with tears, but laugh and talk of me as if I were beside you there. I'd come, could I but find the way. But would not tears and grief be barriers? And when you hear a song or see a bird I loved, please do not let the thought of maybe be sad. For I am loving you just as I always have. You are so good to me. There are so many things I wanted still to do, so many things to say to you. Remember that I did not fear. It was just leaving you that was so hard to face. We cannot see beyond, but this I know, I loved you so. It was heaven here with you.
Faye had the capacity to relate to people of every age and of every generation. And to prove that to you, we have a few people from different generations of different ages to speak about their relationship with her. I won't tell you who's the oldest. You'll know that. And I won't tell you who's the youngest, but I'm going to call them up in order from older to younger. And the first one to speak is a wonderful niece, Barbara.
I'm going to start with a story that has to do with my grandson, Jackson. When Jackson was in preschool, they had a special event where a mystery guest could come and surprise their student. And the students didn't know when it was going to be their turn or who their mystery guest was. So I got to be the mystery guest. And I came to Jackson's preschool, I think he was 3. And he was surprised and delighted, and I got my hugs, and it was wonderful. So the teacher said, "Jackson, would you introduce your mystery guest?" And he said, "This is Grammy." And the teacher said, "Well, thank you, but would you introduce her? What's her name?" And he paused, and he stopped, and he said, "Grammy." That's all I was. I was Grammy. I wasn't Barbara or Mrs. Unicle. I was Grammy. And I say that because each one of us has a memory of Aunt Faye or with Aunt Faye based on our own context. She was Aunt Faye to me. She was mom. She was sister. But I have a unique thing to share with you, and that is a letter that Aunt Faye gave me a couple of years ago that she wrote in 1945. And so here is Faye Schwartz at 20, and she is visiting my mom and dad and me and at Warner Robins Base, where my father was stationed in the Army. And so this letter she gave to me because it mentions me very briefly in that she started this letter yesterday but didn't go any further before something came up, meaning my niece Barbara Ann. She absolutely won't leave me alone for 2 minutes. If I sit down to read a minute, like a flash of lightning, she comes dashing over and insists that I read to her. I didn't even write to my mother and dad yet, and I know I'm in for a good bawling out when I get home. My trip here was fine, and Ray, I don't know what I would have done without my brother and sister-in-law, without you. As yet, I still haven't been able to get my reservations to come home. I'll skip some. Yesterday, I stayed out in the sun for a while. The weather is beautiful. My sister does nothing but feed me. I wouldn't tell her, but I think she's a wonderful cook. Last night, my brother-in-law took me to see Here Come the Waves with Betty Hutton. And if you have ever been to a frontier town, you'll know exactly what Warner Robins is like. 3 stores, a post office, a movie, and anything else is a tavern. Yesterday, my sister and I got on a bus, and the driver didn't even know where he was going. Tonight, Selma is taking me to see I'll Be Seeing You with Joseph Cotton, Shirley Temple, and some others. Sal and Mel take turns taking me out. One has to stay home with the baby. I'm doing nothing but taking things easy and sorting out a few problems which need solving. Please write to me here, that is, if you want to, and let me know how everything is. Don't work too hard. Best regards to your family. I'll be waiting to hear from you. Love, Faye. And they were married a year later. And you know the rest in terms of what happened. So, as Jackson only knew me as Grammy, I knew her as Aunt Faye. And I treasure that relationship. So anyway, this was from 1945.
Thank you. And I think it's only people from our generation that get to see letters instead of something on a screen. So I encourage all of you to write letters because people love receiving them, and it's different. So the next person to come up is Faye's son, Mark.
Hi, there have been memories that have been flying around my head for the last few days, and I wanted to share them with you. One of them is a very old one, and one of them is more recent. When I was about 8 years old, there was a knock on the door one day, and there were 2 strangers there. There was a woman and her daughter who was about my age, and I had never seen either one of them before. But Mom ushered them in, offered them something to eat, asked them if they would like a drink. And it turns out that the girl had been struck or hit by a boy at school. And the girl thought that I was the boy who hit her. And she said, yes, he's the one. She identified me as being the one who hit her. And my parents, my mother showed so much concern for this little girl who had accused me of doing something terrible. And the girl, as it turned out, was a hemophiliac. And when she was hit by the boy, she had to be hospitalized. And Mom was so caring for this girl that it upset me as a 7 or 8-year-old boy that she was being so nice. But that's who Mom was. Anyway, my parents took instant responsibility. If I was the one who did this, they were going to take care of it. They were going to take care of the expenses. They were going to take care of everything. They accepted full parental responsibility, and they asked me if I did it, and I said no. They took me in the back, and they explained to me that if I hit the girl, it wasn't my intention to hurt her, and they knew that that I was traumatized by this, but they told me what their responsibilities were as parents, and they asked me again to make sure that I was telling them the truth. Are you being honest? You didn't hurt the girl. And I said, I don't even know her. So they came back in the other room and they told the woman that I didn't do it. And she said, well, your son is lying. And she said, that boy doesn't lie. And my parents kind of escorted the girl and her mother out the door. And when this incident was over, my mom was so comforting to me. I was very traumatized by this. And she held me and she explained that everything was going to be okay. And it was. And it's something, I don't know why it stands out so much in my mind, but it kind of exemplifies a lot of qualities about my mother. Showing the hospitality extended to total strangers, accepting responsibility for if they were in fact responsible, the genuine care and concern that she had for this little girl, and complete and total support for me, and then the love that they showed me afterwards when they saw how traumatized I was by the accusation. And I think it affected me to the point where I ultimately, when I became a lawyer, I handled a lot of cases of wrongful identification. And so it had effect on me at that time. I learned a lot about parental responsibility, and I think it actually affected my choice of career as I became a lawyer. The other memory is more recent. Mom was suffering from Alzheimer's for the last few years of her life, and in November we had to put her in a memory care center at Belmont Village in Glenview. And for a while she was doing quite well, but in the last few months her cognitive health and her physical health deteriorated. And every time I went to visit my mom, at the end of the visit I talked to the nurse, and the nurse would always ask the same question: does your mom still recognize you? And as time went on and my mom's condition worsened, it didn't matter. The answer to that question was always yes. My mom always recognized me. Even after she was no longer, she didn't remember how to eat, how to chew her food, how to swallow. She didn't recall the necessities, how to do the things that you necessarily had to do to survive. And yet she knew who I was, she knew who Myra was, and she told me every time that she saw me that she loved me. And that was right up until the very last week or two of her life. And I think it's only fitting that her love for her family was the last thing that went. And after all of this, it's a memory that I will carry with me forever.
That was beautiful. I want you to know that when we talked together on Monday, Mark told the end of that story that he didn't tell here. Correct me if I'm wrong. He said that a few days later, that same woman who said that Mark hit her daughter came back and said, "I'm sorry because we found out who really hit her, and I wanted you to know that that was the way it was." So his parents believed, that was right? His parents believed him anyway, but he was even more vindicated. The next person who is going to share with us is the next youngest person, and that is her grandson, Robbie. Or do they call you Robert now?
No, not both. When I was asked to say a few words about my grandmother, I'll take this off. when I was asked to say a few words about my grandmother, I asked myself, how does one summarize the life of a beloved wife, mother, sister, and grandmother to so many, especially here today? After some thinking, pondering, some thoughts myself on the plane ride here last night, I came up with an answer that's rooted in all of us, and that's the 5 basic human senses. Touch. We're all here today because Grandma touched each one of our hearts and lives in some way. For me, what touched me the most about my grandmother was her devotion to her family. At the age of 93, there was no stopping her from attending Shana and I's wedding in Atlanta. It was not enough just to be there. Grandma had to be front and center for her grandson and her granddaughter's big day. How do I know? At the end of that amazing night, the wedding photographer took a group photo on the dance floor. Now let me note, this was probably close to midnight. Where was Grandma? Oh, she was right there, front and center, with the biggest smile on her face. May I add, this was well past her bedtime. Sight. If there was one thing Grandma always had her eyes on besides her family, it was books. Come to her house on any given day, and you'd find her deep in the latest biography or history book. To this day, those genres are 2 of my favorites, too. And I'm not ashamed one bit to have said, and to still say, that I shared the same reading taste as my grandmother. It's what will and forever will bond us. I'm going to combine 2, smell and taste. Mandel bread and chocolate chip cookies. I need not say any more. She made them, and I ate them. And when they weren't part of our weekly Sunday night dinners, you knew something was very wrong. And finally, hearing. I saved this sense close to close out my thoughts today because it's the sense that personally impacted Grandma the most, but also the sense for which I may have one of the fondest memories of her. She was our family photographer, and as such, never shied away from pulling out her camera to capture her subjects. It didn't hurt that this particular subject loved the attention. While you would think this would all fit into the sight category, to me, the memory that will forever be etched in my mind is the one of that sound of her distinctive 35 millimeter camera automatically rewinding after she snapped the final photo of the film's roll. It's a sound that she may have had trouble hearing herself, but one that I will forever associate with her. While today signifies a culmination of that final roll of film being developed, like the photographs she took and the senses she invoked, her memory will live on forever. I love you so much, Grandma. You will be missed by all.
And the last speaker is the youngest of the group, and that is a nephew, Michael.
Great nephew.
Great nephew? He's a nephew or the great nephew? No, he's a great nephew. He's a great nephew.
Great nephew. Hi everyone, my name's Michael. Aunt Faye was my great aunt. And as I was driving over here, I had to get out the family tree with my mom and be like, it's 2 greats, right? It's not just one. So we had the same confusion. The foundation of my relationship with Aunt Faye was built in my grandmother's living room over Shabbat dinners or high holidays. The time that I spent the most time with her was when I was in middle school or elementary school, and she had a great laugh. That really filled up the room. She'd ask me about what I was learning in school, tell me about some of the books that she was reading, and just had a very warm presence that I felt. But I think the impact that she had on me went beyond just our conversations in that living room. It was the the warmth that I felt through her children and through her grandchildren, through Mark and Robbie and Myra. When my mom was in college and my grandma was off studying in Israel for the summer, Aunt Faye and Uncle Ray took her in for the summer, housed her, supported her, took her to work. And my mom talks about that summer all the time in our home. And I think the lessons that she took spending time with them had a profound impact on me, even though my time with my aunt was much shorter. And it was the same thing with Robbie. When I was in 6th grade, he was a director of a Deerfield sports camp. And we were probably a pretty hard group to manage, but I think the patience and enthusiasm and humor that he was able to address each situation with as a leader of that group, I felt Faye there. And so, although as the youngest of the group and having spent the less time with her, I'm confident that her presence, her character, her enthusiasm for life is going to be felt through not just her direct family, but her extended family, her friends, everyone that's here today, and people that aren't here or will be here in the future. So, thank you.
Okay, so someone once said you should never follow a great speaker, and here I am following all these great speakers. And people, not just great speakers, but people who spoke so dearly from their hearts. And now it is my job to be the metorgamon. I'm just the translator. I'm not the speaker. I went to the house on Monday night, and I spoke to some members of the family and asked some questions, and these are their responses, and this is what they felt. First of all, I said, tell me, who was Faye Schwartz? If you had to describe her, who was she? And some of the answers said, she was the epitome of warmth and love and of inclusion. She loved everyone, and she made friends easily. She was so good at drawing people out. They loved to talk to her and listen to her. She was an artist, and Myra shared that her mom was also supportive of her being an artist and took her to the Art Institute for classes. Faye enjoyed her life every day, and she loved her sister Selma so dearly. And I remember one dinner party I went to at Barbara and John's house, and Selma and Faye were sitting next to each other, and I don't know what, but they were laughing and laughing and laughing at everything that the other one said and having such a good time, and they always did that every second that I ever saw them. Ray and Faye were not only good to their children, but to anyone that their children brought home. Some friends said they never knew that parents could be so kind and accepting as Faye and Ray were. Faye had trust in people, and that's why everyone was honest with her, because she was so accepting. She enjoyed everything, and she loved company. Her house was always the meeting place for our entire family. Ray and Faye had 20 to 30 people for dinner every Sunday. They never knew ahead of time who was coming and when they were coming, but somehow they always had enough food, and there was always great conversations and lots of laughter. And she also had a special treat cabinet, which I remember, and Robbie remembers too, that was very important. And when we were children, we would not say hello until after we looked in the special treat cabinet and found out what we, and there's other people who are shaking their head. They were also in that special treat cabinet. Every time they came in the house, that's where they checked it out. And she usually had Mandel bread and cookies available. Myra had a jewelry showing regularly, and all of her customers loved the cookies, and I'm not positive if they came first to see the jewelry or if they came first to eat the cookies, but they loved both. Faye was warm and loving, her family shared, smart, a voracious reader, as you've heard. She remembered what she read, and she loved having discussions about the books. For a birthday party, everyone was asked to bring books that were old, books that they loved, books that were new, didn't matter. She read them all. She was accepting, and she accepted all people, no matter what your age, no matter what your station, no matter what your time. Without words, she made everyone feel loved, and her eyes lit up when she saw you, and at the end, she would say, I love you, and you are beautiful, and you knew that came from her heart. I asked, what were her greatest joys in life? And you can imagine. The responses were her children, her grandchild, and even her new great-grandchild. She never met him personally, but she saw pictures of the baby on a computer. She touched the screen, and she blew a kiss. I think that was the blessing she gave for Lily's life. I asked, what did she do in her life? And the answers were, she volunteered at Melvin Wolf's brass furniture showroom. She painted, she sculptured. As a matter of fact, she and Ray once took a sculpture class, and every time they went, Faye worked on that sculpture so that it would be perfect. In the meantime, my Uncle Ray made many sculptures, maybe many thousands, I don't know, during that class, because every sculpture he put up and he did it, and that was the end of that sculpture. I finally asked, what is the legacy that Aunt Faye left you? And the answers were acceptance of all people, loving relatives, welcoming everyone, being interested in people. And one note that I just want to share personally, I was lucky enough to be the flower girl at my Aunt Faye and Uncle Ray's wedding. I was 5 years old, and my Aunt Faye, surprise to me, made a dress for me that was the exact duplicate of her wedding dress. Now, if you can imagine being 5 and wearing a real wedding dress, it was beyond my imagination. And she even had a little veil made for me that looked like that, and I wore it for several Halloweens afterwards and got more cookies than anybody else that walked around. So, we praise you, God, for this cherished human being. Adonai Lakach, we praise you, God, although she has been taken from us, it's part of the inscrutable plan of the universe. Baruch Dayan Ha'amet. We praise you, God, the judge of truth. And now I ask that you will read with me. You have El Malay Rachamim? Yeah. We're going to read first El Malay Rachamim together, and then we will say Kaddish. O God, full of compassion, thou who dwellest on high, grant perfect rest beneath the sheltering wings of thy presence, among the holy and pure, who shine as the brightness of the firmament unto the soul of Faye Schwartz, who has gone unto eternity. Lord of mercy, bring her under the cover of thy wings, and let her soul be bound up in the bond of eternal light. Be God's possession, and may her repose be peace. Amen. And on the back page is the Kaddish, and if we please stand, if you are able. The Kaddish is a prayer that doesn't talk about death. It talks about the greatness of this universe, the greatness of this world, and the greatness of even knowing the people that we've known, and that we should praise God and praise the world. And we say together, Yit Gadal, Yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah, V'alma Divrach Rutei V'yamlich Malchutei, B'chayechon Uvyomechon V'chayei D'kol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agala U'izman Kari V'yamru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevarach Leolam U'lalmei Omaya. Yit Barach V'yishtabach V'yit Pa'ar V'yit Romam V'yit Naseh. V'yitadar V'yitalev V'yitalal V'chmei D'chudsha Brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, da'amiran v'yalma v'yamru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shmaya, v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yamru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yamru amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the interment service will continue at Shalom Memorial Park Cemetery located at 1700 West Rand Road in Arlington Heights. The family will be returning here till 5 p.m. for a meal of condolence. Everyone here is invited, and memorial contributions to the American Hearing Research Foundation would be appreciated. For those of you who are here, all that information is on the service folder. For those of you who are joining us online, that information can be found on the funeral home's website. For those of you who will be driving to the cemetery in the procession will be forming in the parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights and hazard lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, please use your horn liberally as you're going through the intersections. And please do not speak or text on your cellular phone while driving to the cemetery. At this time, I invite everyone to please rise and stand in place as we escort the casket of Faye Schwartz along with Rabbi Morton, Rabbi Kudan, and the entire Schwartz family from the chapel. Then you may return to your cars.